You've probably been told that controlling diabetes is all about cutting sugar, watching carbs, and taking your medication on time. And if you're doing all that, you might believe you're already doing everything right. But what if that belief is exactly what's holding you back? Here's the uncomfortable truth most people never hear. Blood sugar damage doesn't come from what you eat once in a while. It comes from what quietly keeps pushing glucose into your bloodstream every single day, even when you think you're eating safe. That's the invisible enemy. Not sugar itself, but insulin resistance, silently getting worse while your numbers look manageable. And while nothing feels urgent, something is happening underneath. Tiny blood vessels stiffen, nerves lose protection, kidneys filter under constant strain. This damage doesn't announce itself with pain. It builds quietly until one day it shows up as vision problems, numb feet rising, A1C or labs that suddenly don't look so stable anymore. What makes this even more dangerous is that many of the most powerful tools to slow this process aren't found in prescriptions or expensive supplements. They're sitting in kitchens, grocery aisles, and meals you may already be eating but in the wrong way or not at all. Today you're going to see 4 vegetables that research consistently links to better insulin, response lower blood sugar spikes, and long-term protection of the organs diabetes affects first. Most people overlook them. Some were even told they don't matter. By the time you reach the end of this video, you'll understand why that advice was incomplete and how small evidence-based changes on your plate can shift the trajectory of your blood sugar in a way medication alone often cannot. Stay with this because the first one challenges what you've likely believed for years, and the last one works in a way almost no one explains correctly. If insulin resistance is the silent engine behind rising blood sugar, then bitter melon is one of the few foods that directly interferes with that engine. And that's not a metaphor. That's biochemistry. When glucose stays trapped in your bloodstream instead of entering your cells, the problem isn't always what you ate. It's that your cells have stopped responding. Bitter melon works at that exact failure point. It contains plant compounds that researchers often describe as insulin-like because they help shuttle glucose out of the blood and into the cells where it can actually be used. This matters more than most people realize, because high blood sugar doesn't damage the body in dramatic moments. It damages it quietly. It stiffens blood vessels. It inflames kidney filters. It weakens nerves. And all of that can happen even when your numbers don't look catastrophic yet. That's why bitter melon shows up again and again in diabetes research. Not as a miracle cure, but as a metabolic tool. Studies show it improves cellular glucose uptake, stimulates insulin signaling, and reduces how aggressively carbohydrates are absorbed in the gut. In practical terms, that means fewer spikes after meals and lower fasting readings in the morning. What's striking is how little it takes. Bitter melon is extremely low on the glycemic index, well below foods most people already consider safe. A modest daily serving has been linked to reductions in fasting blood glucose, lower post-meal surges, and measurable improvements in long-term markers like A1C. In some clinical observations, A1C dropped by about half to 1 full percentage point over consistent use. That difference alone can change the trajectory of kidney disease, nerve damage, and cardiovascular risk. And here's the part that rarely gets explained clearly. Bitter melon doesn't just lower numbers. It changes how your body behaves around glucose. Instead of insulin shouting and cells ignoring it, the signal becomes quieter and more effective. That's why many people notice something subtle first. Less extreme highs, fewer sudden crashes, more stable energy. Not dramatic, just steadier. This stability matters because instability is what causes damage. It's not one high reading that hurts you. It's the repeated swings up, down, up again that slowly erode blood vessels and nerves. Bitter melon helps smooth those swings. But this is where people often get it wrong. They assume more is better. Or they juice it aggressively. Or they cook it in heavy oils that destroy the very compounds they're trying to use. Bitter melon is powerful precisely because it's concentrated. Too much can push blood sugar too low, especially if you're already on medication. That's not optimization, that's interference. Used correctly, though, it fits seamlessly into real life. Light cooking methods preserve its active compounds. Small, consistent portions work better than large, irregular ones. And timing matters. Many people see the best effect when bitter melon is eaten before meals, when glucose absorption is about to happen. Safety matters here. Bitter melon amplifies glucose-lowering effects. If you're on diabetes medication, it's something to approach thoughtfully, not aggressively, and it's not appropriate for everyone. Pregnancy, certain medications, and specific medical conditions require caution. This isn't about replacing medical care. It's about aligning food with physiology instead of fighting it. The deeper value of bitter melon is this: it challenges the idea that food only affects blood sugar indirectly. This vegetable acts directly on the same pathways your body uses to manage glucose. That's why it's been studied for decades, not weeks. And that's why it keeps showing up in populations that manage diabetes with fewer complications over time. But here's the shift most people don't expect. Bitter melon works best when it's not doing all the work alone. It opens the door. What comes next determines how far that door stays open. Because the next group of foods doesn't just help glucose move better, they change the environment. Insulin is working in all together. And that's where the real long-term protection begins. After hearing what bitter melon can do, it's easy to assume that blood sugar control always requires something intense, bitter, or aggressive. But that's not how long-term stability actually works. In fact, some of the most powerful foods for diabetes are almost invisible, especially on your glucose meter. Leafy greens fall into that category. Spinach, kale, collard greens, Swiss chard foods, so familiar they're often dismissed as just vegetables. But metabolically, they behave very differently from almost anything else on your plate. They don't spike blood sugar, they don't trigger insulin surges, and they don't force your body into damage control mode. That's the mechanism that matters here. Leafy greens operate by not demanding a response. Their glycemic impact is so low that glucose barely rises at all. But more importantly, they improve how your body responds to insulin behind the scenes. They don't shout, they stabilize. This matters because most diabetes damage doesn't come from dramatic spikes you notice. It comes from the background stress, low-grade inflammation, stiffening blood vessels, nerves slowly losing protection, happening while you think things are under control. That's the silent consequence of years of metabolic friction. Leafy greens reduce that friction. Magnesium is a major reason why. It plays a direct role in insulin signaling, helping receptors respond properly instead of ignoring the message. When magnesium status improves, insulin doesn't have to work as hard. Research consistently shows that people with adequate magnesium have better insulin sensitivity and more stable blood sugar patterns. That's not theory, it's observed physiology. Vitamin K is another overlooked factor. It helps regulate calcium placement in the body, keeping it out of arteries, where diabetes tends to accelerate hardening and plaque formation. Flexible blood vessels aren't just a cardiovascular issue, they directly affect how efficiently glucose and oxygen are delivered to tissues. Folate adds another layer. It supports nerve protection and repair, which matters because nerve damage often begins long before pain or numbness becomes obvious. Many people don't connect fatigue, tingling, or reduced sensation to blood sugar until much later. Leafy greens quietly reduce that risk. What people often notice first isn't a dramatic drop in readings. It's something subtler: fewer unpredictable highs, less post-meal heaviness, more consistent energy. That's a sign the system is calming down. And that calm is protective. Studies link daily leafy green intake to lower rates of cardiovascular events, slower kidney function decline, and reduced progression of diabetic complications. Not because they lower sugar fast, but because they make the metabolic environment safer over time. This is where many people make a mistake. They treat leafy greens as a side dish, something optional, something they eat occasionally when they're trying to be good. But consistency matters more than volume. A moderate amount eaten daily outperforms large amounts eaten sporadically. Preparation also matters. Light cooking improves mineral absorption. Excessive boiling strips nutrients away. And for some people, balance is important, especially if you're on blood thinners or have a history of kidney stones. The goal isn't excess, it's alignment. Used correctly, leafy greens don't compete with medication. They make medication work in a calmer, less hostile environment. They don't replace insulin signaling. They support it. And here's the key transition most people miss. Bitter melon helps glucose move into cells. Leafy greens help cells respond better once it's there. One opens the door, the other improves the room. But even when glucose handling improves, damage already done at the cellular level still matters. Inflammation, oxidative stress, tissue injury. That's where the next food enters the picture, not as a stabilizer, but as a repair signal. Because the next vegetable doesn't just help manage blood sugar, it helps undo what high blood sugar has already started to damage. And that's where broccoli changes the conversation entirely. By the time blood sugar becomes a daily concern, something important has already happened beneath the surface. It's not just about glucose moving in and out of cells anymore. It's about what repeated exposure to high sugar has done to tissues over time. Inflammation builds, oxidative stress rises, cells that once handled insulin efficiently begin to malfunction. That's the stage where management alone isn't enough. Repair becomes the priority. This is where broccoli enters the picture and why it's fundamentally different from the foods that came before it. Broccoli doesn't work by forcing glucose down or suppressing appetite. Its power comes from a compound called sulforaphane, a sulfur-based molecule that activates the body's own cellular defense systems. Instead of pushing numbers down temporarily, it helps cells recover their ability to function normally under metabolic stress. That matters because silent damage is the real threat in diabetes. Blood vessels stiffen long before symptoms appear. Kidney filters inflame quietly. Nerves lose insulation without warning signs. Even when readings look acceptable, oxidative stress continues to wear the system down. That's why complications often seem to arrive suddenly. The damage was accumulating the entire time. Sulforaphane interrupts that process. Research shows it reduces markers of oxidative stress and inflammation that are elevated in people with type 2 diabetes. It improves insulin sensitivity by calming inflammatory signals in fat tissue that normally block insulin's message. And it protects pancreatic beta cells, the very cells responsible for insulin production, from ongoing damage. In practical terms, this translates to measurable outcomes. Studies link regular broccoli consumption to reductions in fasting blood glucose and meaningful improvements in A1C over time. Not dramatic overnight drops, but steady movement in the right direction. That's exactly what long-term protection looks like. Many people first notice something subtle. Post-meal readings don't spike as aggressively. Energy feels more stable through the afternoon. That constant low-grade fatigue begins to lift. These aren't placebo effects. They're signs that cellular stress is easing. Broccoli also plays a critical role in liver health, which is often overlooked in diabetes conversations. The liver helps regulate blood sugar between meals. When it's inflamed or burdened by fat, glucose control worsens. Sulforaphane activates detoxification pathways that reduce fat accumulation in the liver and improve glucose regulation at the source. Cardiovascular protection follows naturally. By reducing oxidative damage, broccoli helps preserve blood vessel elasticity and reduces plaque formation. That's not just about heart attacks. It's about circulation to the kidneys, the eyes, and the nerves, the organs diabetes affects first. But broccoli's effectiveness depends heavily on how it's prepared. This is where many people unintentionally cancel out the benefit. Overcooking destroys the enzyme activity required to form sulforaphane. Heavy boiling leaches compounds into water that's poured down the drain. High heat microwaving can degrade key precursors almost entirely. Light steaming preserves the chemistry. Short cooking times matter. And pairing broccoli with foods that support enzyme activity can dramatically increase sulforaphane availability. This isn't about gourmet techniques, it's about respecting the biology. Safety matters here too. Broccoli is generally well tolerated, but balance is important for people with thyroid conditions or those on blood-thinning medication. Consistency beats excess. Regular moderate intake works better than large amounts eaten occasionally. What makes broccoli unique in this sequence is its role in repair. Bitter melon improves glucose movement. Leafy greens stabilize the metabolic environment. Broccoli helps clean up the damage that instability leaves behind. But even repair has limits if glucose continues to surge after meals. That's why the final piece isn't about insulin signaling or cellular defense. It's about physically stopping glucose from entering the bloodstream too fast in the first place. And that's where the next vegetable works in a way most people never expect, not inside the cell, but inside the digestive tract itself. Because the final food doesn't just influence blood sugar, it intercepts it. By this point, you've seen how blood sugar can be influenced inside the body, how glucose moves into cells, how insulin signals improve, how damaged tissues begin to recover. But there's one critical moment that happens before all of that, and that moment is digestion. Because the fastest way blood sugar gets out of control isn't always insulin failure. It's speed. When carbohydrates break down too quickly, glucose floods the bloodstream faster than insulin can respond. That's when spikes happen. That's when damage accelerates. And that's where okra works in a way no other vegetable on this list does. Okra doesn't rely on hormones or receptors. It works physically. Inside okra is a natural gel-like substance, a soluble fiber matrix that forms a viscous barrier in the digestive tract. When you eat it, this gel slows how quickly carbohydrates are broken down and absorbed. Instead of glucose rushing into the blood all at once, it enters gradually in a controlled stream your body can actually manage. This matters because post-meal spikes are some of the most damaging events in diabetes. Even if fasting numbers look acceptable, repeated surges after meals quietly injure blood vessels, strain kidneys, and inflame nerves. Many people don't realize this is happening because spikes fade before the next test. Okra reduces those spikes at the source. Studies show that meals paired with okra result in significantly lower post-meal glucose peaks. Over time, this translates to better overall control, improved insulin sensitivity, and more stable A1C trends. Not because okra forces blood sugar down, but because it prevents the surge from happening in the first place. There's another layer here that's often overlooked. Okra's fiber doesn't just slow glucose absorption, it also slows gastric emptying, which means food stays in the stomach longer. That leads to prolonged satiety, fewer cravings, and less reactive eating later in the day. Many people notice they snack less without trying to. That stability protects the pancreas as well. Flavonoids found in okra help shield beta cells from oxidative stress, the same stress that gradually reduces insulin production in type 2 diabetes. Preserving these cells matters. Once they're gone, they don't regenerate easily. Cardiovascular benefits follow naturally. Okra's soluble fiber binds bile acids in the gut, forcing the body to use cholesterol to replace them. LDL levels decline. Triglycerides improve. Blood pressure trends lower as arterial inflammation decreases. These changes don't announce themselves loudly, but they add up over time. Kidney protection is another quiet effect. Reduced glucose spikes mean less stress on filtration units that already work harder in diabetes. Studies observing okra consumption show improvements in markers related to protein leakage, a sign the kidneys are under less strain. But as with the other foods, application matters. Okra is most effective when it's prepared in a way that preserves its gel structure. Excessive frying destroys the fiber network and adds inflammatory fats. Overcooking breaks down the very compounds responsible for glucose control. Moderate cooking methods preserve function. Consistent portions matter more than large servings. And timing can make a difference, especially when okra is eaten close to carbohydrate-containing meals. Safety is part of the conversation. Okra's fiber can interfere with medication absorption if consumed at the same time. Spacing matters. And for people prone to kidney stones, moderation is important due to oxalate content. This isn't about excess. It's about precision. What makes okra the final piece of this sequence is its position in the process. Bitter melon improves insulin action. Leafy greens stabilize the system. Broccoli helps repair damage. Okra steps in before glucose overwhelms the system at all. It closes the loop. When digestion slows, spikes soften. When spikes soften, damage slows. And when damage slows, the body finally has room to recover. And that brings everything together. Because once you understand where blood sugar problems begin and how they compound, you stop chasing numbers and start changing trajectories. And that's exactly what the final takeaway is about. At this point, you don't need more fear. You need clarity and a sense that you're not powerless in this process. What you've seen today isn't about chasing perfect numbers or overhauling your entire life overnight. It's about understanding how small, consistent choices can change how your body handles blood sugar day after day. When you support insulin instead of fighting it, when you reduce spikes instead of reacting to them, the body does what it was designed to do: stabilize. You don't have to start with everything. Start with one change, one vegetable, one meal, one habit you can repeat tomorrow. That's how real progress begins, not with pressure, but with consistency. If you stick with it, the results show up quietly at first. More stable readings, fewer surprises after meals, better energy, and over time, lab results that finally start moving in the right direction. Not because of extremes, but because you aligned your choices with how your body actually works. If this information helped you see blood sugar differently, do yourself a favor and save this video. Come back to it when motivation dips or when you need a reminder that control doesn't come from willpower alone, it comes from understanding. And if you want to stay informed with clear research-backed insights on blood sugar metabolism and long-term health, consider subscribing to the channel. New videos are shared regularly to help you make smarter, safer decisions without hype, without fear, and without misinformation. If you have a question or if one small change you learned today stood out to you, let me know in the comments. Your experience matters and it helps others who are walking the same path. Take care of your body, start where you are, and remember, progress is built one informed choice at a time.